Polipede works here. So, today I want to discuss a type of devil fruit, a type of Zoan devil fruit that I think has been introduced into the story but hasn't been formally explained yet. The topic of this discussion is the North Commander of the Revolutionary Army, known as Karasu. Karasu is this big, tall guy. He's 8'8". He's got this plague doctor's mask on. He's got sort of like this Doflamingo coat on, but it's black. Okay, so we know that he can turn into a murder of crows. The interesting part about that is in the name, a murder of crows. When you have a bunch of animals of the same type together, they are usually called by a particular moniker. So, like I just said, when you have a bunch of crows together, they're called a murder of crows. When you have a bunch of ravens together, they're called an unkindness. When you have a bunch of lions together, they're called a pride. And when you have a bunch of pandas together, they're funnily enough called an embarrassment. The idea with Karasu, I think, is that he is a Zoan devilfruit type. Similarly to how, say, you have your ancient Zoans, your carnivorous Zoans, your mythical Zoans, etc. I think he's of a class that's called maybe a group Zoan or a flock Zoan, in which the user can actually disperse into a wide number of one particular type of animal and come back together, not unlike a Logia. And as we see with Karasu, when he becomes this murder of crows, he disperses like a Logia, and he can do things as talk. We see that in chapter 794, kind of the end of Dressrosa, when it was wrapping up. We were learning all that about Sabo. He talks there. So, like Zoans, he can still talk in his animal state. Though, I would say what's different about him is that I'm guessing perhaps his hybrid state and full state are simply him dispersing into crows, where it's still like part of his body still intact. And we see this when the Revolutionary Army attacks Pinkbeard. So yeah, I do believe that he is a different type of Zoan. Now, I don't think the animals in this particular subclass of Zoan fruit, I don't think they'll have features, or the features will be very simple because it's not as, say, personalized as a normal Zoan, in which you are a singular individual turning into a giraffe or a bear or whatever. You're turning into a flock of something. You're turning into multiple bodies at once, but then you're coming back together into a singular body. And I think that's kind of like the caveat of the ability. I don't think there's anything else particularly special about it. Maybe the diversity is the special thing that's unique about this sort of class of devil fruit, because even though we see Karasu talking as one crow, perhaps he could talk as multiple crows, or perhaps the consciousness is spread out between all of them. So like all of them act like as a hive mind, because technically they're all this one guy. So very interesting ability, especially when you consider it could probably be combined with observation hockey. Imagine being like a murder of crows and you can see the same thing from multiple directions, plus all those crows have observation hockey. Very interesting stuff. I wonder if there's a size limit. If this is true, could a person perhaps be a stampede of bulls or a troop of chimpanzees or something like that? Since this is relatively new, and I think we might get an explanation of what Karasu is very soon, if this is indeed true. We'll probably get a good line of what are the limitations of this ability are, or the stipulations of what this fruit class can be. Because I think it might be a little overpowered if someone becomes like a herd of elephants or something like that. Though, based on how wacky devil fruits can get, and seeing as how, unless you're talking about mythical Zoans, the Zoan fruit category is a little underpowered, if you ask me, compared to Logia and Paramecia. Another thing that's very interesting is that if one of these birds are attacked, right, from the that make up the body that is Karasu, I wonder if he will feel any pain for that. Like, are we on Robin rules, in which a spawn body part being attacked transmutes the pain back to the user? Though, based on what we see in the fight with Pinkbeard, it seems as though Karasu is like a Logia, or like say many of the paramecias that sort of generate something. It seems as though he can either disperse completely into birds, or like have a sort of infinite generator of birds on if he chooses, and to keep like a portion of his body solidified. So it's kind of hard to depict if there is actually a hybrid state here. I know I said earlier the hybrid state probably is just being in a state of transformation instead of not in transformation, but that may not be the case, because as we see with other weird Zoans like Tamago, the rules of Zoans don't necessarily seem to be a set of 3 transformations. The theme of Zoans only seem to be you transforming into an animal. That's why I take from that. That's like baseline of what classifies a Zoan. That's why we have what we had in 1044 if you weren't caught up. But yeah, the idea is simply animal transformation, which Karasu does do. He does become an animal. Now, are there any more of him in the series? Not yet. Do I think there will be? Yes. So for the record, what do I think his fruit is actually called? I think the naming convention of these fruits would probably be bird, because we're talking about bird, or tori in Japanese, model murder, which sounds harsh, but okay. And seeing as how naming conventions for groups of animals can be extremely diverse, I don't see why there wouldn't be more of these fruits, because there's a ton of material to go off on. And that's one of the things that we haven't really covered when talking about animals with Zoans, because we've covered humans, we've gone over mythological animals, we've gone over prehistoric animals, animals that are, or just animals that are extinct, and then we have gone over a difference between your run-of-the-mill Zoan and your carnivorous Zoan. So yeah, I think there's room for a Zoan fruit class based on what Karasu can do, of fruits that give one the power to basically become a multitude of a certain animal. If you like stuff like this, please feel free to check out my YouTube channel, Polipede Works. And if you like what you see, I would appreciate your subscription. Thank you so much. See you next time.